So, hello and welcome back, everyone, to today's episode and to our first non-hosty rabbit hole story. It feels weird, Ian, not hearing one of our stories. Today we got Angelo on the podcast, talking a little bit about your rabbit hole story and all of the things you do in Bitcoin. Before we get started, quick introduction for those not in the know. My name is Joel. I'm the co-host here in the show. And I'll leave the word to my lovely co-host.
I'm also the co-host, questioning Bitcoin, Ian Scanlon, and it's good to see you guys again. Thank you for joining us. Like we said, we've got Angelo here with us this evening. Hello, Angelo. How are you?
I'm good. I just want to say quickly before we get started, I'm going to be the first non-host guest on the soon-to-be biggest podcast in Bitcoin. So,
Absolutely, mate. Thank you so much. Yes.
Let's see.
yeah,
We can aim high. We can aim high, Joel. Come on.
Yeah. We won't chill any BlockFi shit or whatever. So we're good to go so far. Angelo, for the people not in the know, can you maybe give like a 5-minute introduction to who you are and how you got started in Bitcoin?
Yeah. So, who I am, I guess still figuring that one out, but I can tell you how I got into Bitcoin. So about I can't even do the math, 5 years ago. Basically, when I was 12, I was in primary school. It was a bit of is it a square peg in a round hole or a round peg in a square hole?
Before we answer that, did you say 5 years ago? So you're 17?
No, I was 12 years old, so it was about 5
Okay.
years ago. I'm 20, yeah. Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so, yeah, I found Bitcoin 5 years ago, yeah. So about 8 years ago, when I was in school, I was 12. All right.
Nice.
We got that sorted. Anyway.
We can do math, guys. We can do math, don't
yeah,
worry.
it's important when you're predicting, Bitcoin and everything. But anyway, yeah, so I was a bit of a, whichever one it is, round hole, square peg, whatever the fucking saying is. But I was that, basically, in school. And I never really liked the curriculum that I was taught. And growing up in Wales as well, the school wasn't great. The primary school I went to, turns out, we thought it was good, but a couple of years after I ended up leaving, it came out that all the results were completely forged by the headmistress anyway. So, yeah, it wasn't a great school. Yeah, so I didn't fit too well into that. It felt like a bit of a waste of time. And being in Wales, you've got to study dumb stuff like Welsh, even though nobody in Wales actually speaks Welsh. I know there's going to be people now responding saying, yeah, I do. But 99% of Welsh people do not speak Welsh. And yeah, it's mandatory curriculum. And I think history in primary school, I remember we studied, I think it was Henry VIII for like 3 years straight, just going over the same material for about 3 years, like literally no changes. Welsh, 90% of the Welsh lessons we spent were just writing a short introduction about yourself in Welsh, and that's like years of doing that same exact task over and over. So it was borderline negligence, to be honest. Anyway, I didn't like that, and then when I was 12, 2 years into secondary school, I was doing a lot of parkour, and then had a pretty bad parkour accident at this competition, and ruined my spleen, and had a bit of a midlife crisis at the age of 12, I guess. And then after that, realized I'm going to die. It sort of brought mortality quite close to the face. And then when you realize that, you stop caring so much about bullshit, and it sort of helps you find the signal through the noise a little bit when it comes to just life in general. So I ended up leaving, and then yeah, I left school after some convincing. I had to write like a 22-page document to my family members to convince them this was a good idea. And yeah, so luckily I was still manning the opposing argument a solid amount, so I managed to get out. And then about a year later, found out about Ethereum. I know you wanted it to be Bitcoin, but unfortunately I found out about Ethereum first. But that led me to Bitcoin, and over the course of the next few years, basically started studying it. And the rest of the story goes, it just becomes you, I guess. So I guess that answers the who I am question as well. I'm a Bitcoiner.
Nice. And we'll get probably very deep into your book as well. But before we do that, What would you say currently is the number one thing that keeps you going in Bitcoin?
Oh, fear. Um, you know, if it doesn't work, if Bitcoin doesn't work, and we fail to sort of get the snowball going, then the future doesn't look good, and having kids becomes a question that is more nuanced than it is today. And so if we don't sort this shit out, then we've got problems on our hands, basically. And so, it's, I guess, on the other side of fear is always love as well. I love Bitcoin, but yeah, it's primarily just, I think if you're in a burning building and you know the escape route and you're not telling people about it and you're not devoting yourself to making sure you're getting as many people out as possible, then, well, you're sort of just letting it happen. So yeah, I'd say fear, probably.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. If you're in a burning building and you know the escape route and you don't share that, then because really you've got the responsibility now that you know and understand Bitcoin. Really, is that what I'm taking from what you're saying? That you feel that you feel the urge to create signal and put the noise out there about what Bitcoin can offer, and that is the escape route from the fear madness that we are currently existing under.
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. And yeah, it's Bitcoin, I think, is our best bet, because it decentralizes, of course. But yeah, I think it's a great starting point as well. And I believe that if Bitcoin succeeds in doing what it's trying to do, I think it won't be sort of like, the whole idea of fix the money, fix the world, right? It's not because as soon as you fix the money, that's all that was wrong with the world. It's because you fix the money and then all these other things that are wrong with the world start fixing themselves. And so it's sort of like an issue at the systematic level of designing a society. Or if you were to take a bird's eye view of the world and see it as an alien that was trying to look at all the different puzzle pieces and arrange them in the best way that ensures the most positive outcome for the species in total, I think one of the first things you would do is inject decentralization into the system. And if you don't do that and things continue to centralize, centralized singular points of failure tend to be a bad sort of roadmap, if you'd say, for humans. And I think Bitcoin is definitely the best way that we can begin that process of decentralizing a lot of these problems.
So I agree, and thank you for that. But are you essentially saying that Bitcoin provides a clean slate for humanity? It provides that decentralized option for us, for them to build upon moving forward.
Yeah, I had a line in the book that went something like, Bitcoin's a riverbank for those to whom the tide isn't kind. And it's like,
okay, that's an interesting.
When the tide is pushing people towards a certain direction, if that direction is bad, then it's not like Bitcoin is going to completely, clean slate the world, as you said. It's more just like, and it's not pushing in the opposite direction either. It's just a riverbank. It's stationary and it's sturdy and it's not moving. It's not changing. It's just there. It's a lifeboat to the Titanic, essentially. And yeah, we need to get as many people on the lifeboats as possible.
Do you reckon that has, with your history, I mean, you had an accident at 12. From reading the introduction stuff in the book as well, if I remember correctly, it was pretty much do one move wrong and you may be dying very soon-ish. Do you think that had a big impact on your discovery in Bitcoin as well? Because you mentioned early on in your life, you may not live that long, you may die tomorrow if shit goes wrong. And at the same time, with Bitcoin, your biggest answer was fear. If we don't get this right, we set the future straight. Do you think that experience in life had a big impact in your Bitcoin journey as well?
100%, yeah. It's had a big impact in most aspects, and not just from the accident. I'd say the accident actually wasn't that surprising because of just the types of stuff that I was doing often. It was more just parkour in general. Like, I was really, really into it. Obviously, competing and stuff, it was sort of like training all the time, and you start off just learning how to vault over some walls and do stuff like that, but then when you get to the rooftops and it all gets a lot more real, I'd say there's two aspects to it that sort of have fed quite nicely into my perspective on Bitcoin, which, yeah, the first one is, if you get it wrong, you fuck up. So on like a macro perspective, that's sort of the approach that I take to looking at the world right now. And then the other side of it is just the freedom. Like parkour is all about freedom. You're able to do what you want to do with your body. It's physical autonomy. If I want to run across that wall, I know gravity says you shouldn't, but like I can figure it out and do it anyway. So I think like the reason I was so into parkour was because it was just like a pure, unfiltered sense of freedom. And I think my nature, like I naturally move towards freedom in all cases. And so Bitcoin is obviously like the number one freedom tool at the moment, the most important freedom tool. And yeah, I guess because I see things as sort of, act now. Like when you're in the middle of a parkour move, for instance, you don't get to debate and question what's the right move. You just have to figure it out and go for it. And so when it comes to, looking at what I'm doing with my life at the moment, it's sort of like you could sit around and question it and stay on the fence forever, or you could look at this problem, see that there's a solution to it, and then just play the biggest part that I can in the advancement of that solution, basically. Yeah. But yeah, you hit the nail on the head there, I reckon.
That's brilliant. And I'm starting to form a picture about you, listening to you actually, about your analogy earlier about you being a square peg in a round circle, and you doing parkour, having this accident, and essentially having this existential crisis moment in your life, but all at the same time having discomfort about being in the institution that was your school at the time. And it seems from only the 5-10 minutes that we've been having a chat that you appear to be somebody that likes to not push the boundaries, but to live life to its best. And you've mentioned freedom, and it seems like Bitcoin was almost like a natural discovery for you. I know you mentioned that you first came across Ethereum. Why did Ethereum pop up for you first? What was going on for you when Ethereum came into your life?
So basically my dad wanted to understand it. He was looking at he followed this Goldbug news digest, this email thing, and on the footnote it mentioned Ethereum because this was just after it launched in early 2016. So it was just briefly mentioned Ethereum and that it might be worth paying attention to. And then my dad basically was like, he's a bit of a mess with computers, I'm not gonna lie. So he was like, can you explain this to me? And I was like, no. But then I looked into it a little bit, and then that led me onto Bitcoin. I was like, so yeah, at first I definitely could not explain it, but older people, they tend to just think, if you know how to switch the HDMI on your TV, you'll understand every single thing about computers that there is. But yeah, it was definitely a long journey of figuring stuff out, and an even long journey of figuring out why Ethereum is a complete pile of shit. But that realization does come eventually. It was a few years, and I've never been like the smartest cookie or anything like that. So I think it probably could have been a bit quicker if the old God had blessed me with a few more IQ points or whatever. But nevertheless, you get there in the end.
Yeah, and I mean, the whole spiel with all of these altcoins is very intriguing. I can say this because I used to
be quite
work.
Convincing.
Yeah, exactly. Their biggest goal is to convince you of whatever vision they have. Again, I could say it, and any altcoiner can attack me because I used to write a lot of the copy for certain projects. Not going to disclose them because good people working behind, and they're all going to put food on the table, pay rent and shit. But yeah, that is one of the biggest dangers. To me, what is always interesting is, maybe that's a bit different because I got in Bitcoin early first, and I sort of checked out altcoins, but I never was really interested. Once you you started down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, what was the number one thing, that aha moment where you said, holy shit, this is it? Because to me, if you look into Bitcoin, a lot of it is out of context. And people tell you like, you got this consensus mechanism and you got miners and you got energy and whatever the fuck it is. But no one can actually contextualize it and say, if you question Bitcoin, why does it exist? It's ABC. Was that similar for you? Was there a different aha moment?
Yeah, so I'd say there's probably a sort of aha period where I was coming to terms with a lot about how money worked and what money was. That was sort of the first question I was asking back then, because, you know, you're 12 years old, you think it's always existed and it's just this permanent fact of nature. But then, you know, somebody goes, what is
There are
money?
people my age that still think that. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, probably most.
People aged 102.
yeah, thanks, Joel. 101 actually.
There was no need. There was no need. But yeah, so I guess there was that period of looking at the greater puzzle picture in which Bitcoin fitted, or fit, whichever the grammar is for that. I should know, but I don't. There was that, and then I think the biggest aha moment for me was, you know, you're hearing a lot of this stuff, and this is why I spent so much time trying to understand how it works rather than just sort of opinions about what it might do and this and that. I really felt like I needed to understand how it worked, and after I had sort of grasped the sort of elevator pitch of Bitcoin, if you will, the thing that people say in their 5-minute explanations of why Bitcoin is worth paying attention to, I kind of was like, okay, so that's what people are saying. But, you know, until you really understand, you don't have the aha, because you say, well, these people could be wrong. You know, if I don't fully understand it and I can't see how it works, they're just saying things right now that it could be false, it could be marketing, it could be this, it could be that. And there was a moment, I remember I was in the car with my brother, and he's 4 years older than me, so he was looking into, I think he'd got Mastering Bitcoin by Andreas Antonopoulos, and he was reading through that. And I wasn't at the time, and I remember thinking, like, you know, this is all really cool and stuff. Okay, so you've got this like monopoly money that is pervasive through society at the moment, and, you know, somebody has their hand on the button and they can choose to do with the supply what they will, and the supply affects what you can do with your life. Right, that sounds like a scam. And then I had Bitcoin in my head. Okay, it's this thing that there's only a certain amount of them, but they're digital, and so they're just information, so they're not like physical notes. But I know that most money isn't physical notes anyway. Most fiat currency is digital too, but there's something not clicking because this isn't administered by anybody. And so because Bitcoin isn't administered by anybody, how can they have a limited supply and all of this? And I knew that it was like X amount were administered per block, and the blocks were developed by miners. And then it got back down to the final, like the most detailed bit, because I'm big picture first, right? So I got the big picture. And then when the bit of the nonce in the block, the number that you change in order to find the correct hash, for people listening, when I figured out exactly what that meant, how that worked, and the purpose for having a nonce, I was just like, my head just exploded, and I was like, it's finite, you can't make more of it, because I got the sense of the complex maths problem, you know, the SHA and all that. And then as soon as we got down to that final bit, because I remember, just when that clicked, I was just like, holy shit. And then from there on out, I think it was just like, yeah, this can't, there's such a small chance that this breaks. And sure, it might not succeed, that's a different question, but it seems like this thing isn't going to break. And if it's not going to break, then let's push it as hard as we can, you know?
So it seems like you first needed to understand what money was. And then when you understood that, you was then able to test that against what Bitcoin was. And you was almost like on this pathway of like, comparing it to fiat in a way, and just seeing if it stood up against it.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Joel?
You mentioned your brother before, Angelo.
Yeah.
Funny enough, we have you back to back in the recording, so
We do, yeah.
who knows? Maybe in a week they will listen into your brother's story.
Is he going on after?
Yeah. He's I think he's today in a week actually. So you're maybe same time, just
Okay.
different day.
Tell him I say he's got small calves.
Okay, good. I'll say for that one.
I'm going to write it down. Small calves.
Because I've met your brother at BTC Amsterdam, I know he's also quite technically involved. Was that also something you was into? Or did you pick that up through, because I guess being brothers 4 years apart, once both of you got Bitcoin, you sort of were an unbreakable pair talking about sats all the time. Were you also into the technical aspects of it all?
Yeah, so I guess because I was trying to figure out how it worked, it was all very technical for a while. Problem was I was like from probably about from 13 to 15 years old when I was doing like the first like proper deep dive into it. And so basically I was dumb as fuck and none of it made any sense. And it took quite a while for me to get my head around it. My brother was a bit quicker at getting his head around it. And I think he always has been with the more detail. He's like details then big picture. I'm more big picture than details. And so he was always quite good at understanding the technology aspect of it and how it works. And that's carried through to today. You know, he's doing a lot more coding and stuff than I am. But yeah, I guess it was an interesting dynamic being brothers and both looking into it, because I think it probably, there's obviously an initial hurdle of knowledge that you have to jump over before you can fully become enveloped by Bitcoin and the surrounding topics, because you know you have to get past a certain amount of learning before things start clicking, and it's only when things start clicking that you really start becoming attached to it, or sort of, you know, it gets you on the hook then. And yeah, I think because we were brothers and we were both looking into it, it was a sort of like oh, you get something that I don't get, and that makes me feel like the shitter brother. So I'm going to have to go.
Was like a bit of sibling rivalry going on here?
There was a little bit of sibling rivalry, I think. So you might ask him, and he might be like, "What are you talking about?" But on my side, I was definitely a little bit. I guess being the younger brother as well, I sort of wanted to one up him in my Bitcoin knowledge. But then, yeah, that all sort of disappeared when we started actually getting it, and then it was just like there's probably still a little hint of it now. I'm not going to lie, but yeah, it's it was cool to be able to, you know, go through that period of learning with him and bounce ideas off each other and stuff.
I suppose that's quite a rare thing, having someone as close to you as your brother, and then you having that opportunity to go down the rabbit hole together, really, and discover Bitcoin, not only on your own, but, you know, have a bit of a sounding board to bounce off and sort of discover Bitcoin together. And your brother's a bit more technical, like you said. What skill base did you bring to that discovery? What would he say about you that benefited him?
I don't know, metaphors maybe. Yeah, that's probably about it. You know, beyond that, not that much, to be honest with you.
I mean, metaphors are. I love metaphors. So yeah, I can understand that for sure.
Yeah, you should have said bigger calves, but
bigger calves. Yeah, that's exactly what I bring to the table. Yeah, I'm not sure.
We'll make sure to tag that part on Twitter as well for him, just for him.
Yes,
he would love that.
Yeah. I do.
So you got on board. You went through the Ethereum phase, or your dad introduced you. Then your brother got in. You have that back and forth between you two. Was it hard upselling Bitcoin in the family? Because once you have your brother and yourself on board, it's just, I guess, dad, mom, relatives, then the whole world from there. How easy was the upsell for your parents then?
So my dad obviously took an interest to it before my mum, so it was easier to sort of get him infatuated with it, because quite like myself, he's this philosopher essentially. He gives philosophy talks and helps people out and stuff. Lives in a van as well, so that's a fun fact. But he's a big freedom guy, hence the van. So he was anything that smells of freedom, he's jumping on it. So he had his own motivations for looking into it, and it often was in the form of passing down homework, like, can you figure this out for me, please? So I heard this guy talking about this, what is that? And every time I was like, I don't know, but I'll try to figure it out. And then, it was sort of, so I guess he was sort of like on the tail end of me and my brother's understanding was my dad sort of catching up. But he's very good at just big picture thinking as well. So more similar to me probably than my brother in that regard. But yeah, he's good at taking a lot of different opinions and a lot of different viewpoints and sort of filtering through the noise and getting to the signal and developing a map, essentially a psychological map of, you know, the big picture, the macro world. So I guess that lends itself very well to Bitcoin, because that's sort of exactly what you have to do to understand Bitcoin.
Nice. And your mum?
Mum's still on her way. We're getting there. But yeah, I think she runs a business. So she's got this high street shop that is her baby, so she's devoted to that completely. So I don't think she can bear any more homework on top of the work she does there, because she's 24/7 working. So yeah, I think it's been harder to. Whereas my dad, less working, so more spare time to look into that stuff.
Nice. We'll make sure to send someone from Coin Corner to your mum's shop. Maybe we can paint sets in the future.
We already discussed that. Yeah, we were already looking into doing that. Still might.
Nice,
yeah,
nice.
That'd be brilliant. Yeah, that will be brilliant. Do you know, ever since you were talking about school, I know we're changing gears now, but you were saying that when you were in school, you were learning about Henry VIII and things like that. So there's no different from when I was in school. I was learning about Henry VIII, and it was about the Second World War, and how great Britain was in the Second World War, and it was obviously the same curriculum as it was many years down the line, because I'm 43 now, and it's surprising to hear that the curriculum is pretty much still the same kind of thing. And you wrote a 22-page letter. Can you remember what was in that? Can you remember the sort of things that you were saying to justify why it is that you didn't want to stay in school?
Yeah, so it was the document was basically, I was probably equal, at least at first, when I started to realize that leaving school might actually be a possibility, because I was looking into the regulations in Wales around that as well, and you're allowed to leave school so long as you do receive an education. It doesn't have to be the curriculum that Wales offers. And so when I realized that, and I'd spoken to my dad a little bit about it, and I was, I think, struggling a little bit with the fallout of the accident, and it was sort of just like, that probably softened his heart a little bit and opened it up to optionalities of what might be best for me. And also, I think when you're coming off the back of an experience like that, the things that you're saying are sort of more true to your actual desires and stuff. So I think you could see that when I was saying it then, like, I meant it. Like, I wasn't just a kid coming home saying, I don't want to be in school anymore. It was like, no, I genuinely don't want to. And I think the document then was basically me going, right, I'm 12, so I'm probably an idiot. So I'm probably wrong. Let's figure out if I'm wrong. And I was doing a bunch of research online, like, is home education and self-education a bad idea, right? Because we've got Google now, and they haven't changed the school. So to me, that seems like the school is just a uncompetitive market participant that is refusing to adjust the value of their product because of some ego or monopoly that they hold upon the market, which, basically stops them from having to adjust. And since Google and the internet, the flow of information is now incredibly different to how it was before, and textbooks may not be the best idea, since oftentimes I'd be in school and they'd say, yeah, ignore that section of the textbook, it's wrong, it got disproved. And it's like, well, get new fucking books then, or just like give us a different way of getting the information. Anyway, that's a bit of a sidebar. So I was looking into home education and, pros, cons, all of it. And I had a lot of my own worries, was I going to just become this sort of shell of a human, a social recluse that just can't talk to people, because, school is, I'd say, primarily for social interaction in impressionable years. And so I was looking into that, and the studies on it said no. And I was looking into the curriculum and the actual process of what you would end up learning had I stayed in, what I would come out with at the end, and it turned out to basically just be a certificate. And then also looking into some information, I think it was about how much of what's learned in school is actually retained through adulthood and how much of it is forgotten directly after the test was taken, and it was like a stupid number. And so I was just like, right, well, I'm not even learning this to learn it, so it's not the test. So the test is a test, right? It's quite clearly a test, but what it's testing is sort of assumed to be what you've learned. But the problem is, if people aren't retaining any of the information, and people tend to retain information that they've learned and truly understood, then is the test really testing what you've learned, or is it just testing how good you are at something else? And if it is testing how good you are at something else, what is it? Probably how good you are at sitting down, shutting up, and regurgitating information. So that was kind of like one of the conclusions, and the document itself was basically just like a potential argument against, and then the best I could do at arguing against it. And not because I'd chosen and I was trying to argue against it. The document itself was sort of a place for me to formulate through my own thoughts as well, and genuinely have the, my conscious express itself essentially, and allow the yes, let's leave, and no, let's stay parts of my brain to sort of go at it. And so, because I think it was a genuine sort of search for truth, in a sense, the correct answer, it wasn't a propaganda piece. It ended up being quite persuasive, because the questions and the worries that they would come back with were the same worries that I had, and that I had come to the conclusion were either unfounded or would outweigh or didn't outweigh the risks of inaction. Because humans tend to, this is a thing, I think I mentioned it in the book as well, but it's a common theme in my thinking throughout my life as well, is that humans tend to greatly overestimate the risks of action and underestimate the risks of inaction. They've got a whole saying about it, the devil you don't know is worse than the devil you do. And it's like, nah, it's not. You don't know the devil you don't know, so you don't know if it's worse. And and potentially it's a lot better than the one that you do know. So yeah, it was kind of like taking that approach from it. What are the risks of leaving, and what are the risks of staying? And then sort of the likelihood of each of them, the negative fallout they would cause, and just weighing them together. So yeah.
It seems like you're quite a deep thinker, Angelo.
Deep finger.
I'm a deep thinker.
Where's that edit button? For me, because when I'm just thinking back to when I was 12 as well, I used to do quite a lot of drawing, sketching, and that was kind of like my mindfulness. That was my escapism in a way, for me to focus my attention and just sort of like get lost in my thoughts a little bit, because I'm a bit of a deep thinker as well, and doing something active like sketching helps me get into that mindset. And it would seem from listening to you that writing might sort of do the same thing for you, Angelo. And is that what then led to you being inspired to write a book about Bitcoin?
Yeah, I'd say so. It was, I think, it's people assume that that all of their beliefs are correct because they get a certain fuzzy feeling in their stomach that says this is true. And then, if it's a question of intuition, then sure. But if it's a question of logic, then maybe not. And maybe that feeling that you get is just because you're sort of willfully ignorant to another counter argument to the point that you're holding, that you haven't sort of looked at, because it takes a lot of brain effort and you have to really delve into the idea a lot deeper. And so it's possible and easy to use heuristics and just sort of default to certain perspectives and sort of have strong opinions strongly held, and hold on to them for dear life, because you don't want to actually consider the fact that maybe you didn't look at all the details. And when it comes to writing, there's none of that. You don't get, it's like everything is coming into the spotlight. There's no hidden bits. There's no bits you glossed over. Everything that you thought you know is going to be put against everything you actually do know, and you'll figure out what the difference between those is. And so when you write something, you don't just have a general sense of what you believe to be the case or what you believe to be true. You have to have a syntactically sound argument from premise to conclusion. And when you lay that out in front of you, you can really poke holes in it and figure out where the gaps are, and sort of formulate your understanding of the thing a lot more. And I'd say oftentimes you have the experience where, you'll learn about something, or maybe you've listened to a Bitcoin podcast or whatever it is, and then you'll go to talk about it and you'll be like, it's like and it's just like, yeah, that's because you haven't like sort of cemented your understanding. And so writing, I think, is probably the only way that you can do that. Talking as well, but with writing, you get to actually sort of, you're not rushed. When you're talking to somebody, you're always rushed, right? Because you don't want to come across like a psychopath that just stops for 20 minutes halfway through a sentence because, they'll leave. But when you get to write, you get to sit down and really analyze your own understanding of things. So yeah, writing, I think, is thinking. Writing is thinking.
Yeah, and it cements your ideas in the words after you've had that time to think about it and reflect. And once you write it down, then it's then the final thought.
Yeah, and I did that before even, this is why I've made the distinction as well between matters of logic and matters of intuition, because when I'd actually written a book of the same length when I was 13 called Childlikeness, which was a basically a guide to happiness from the mind of a 13-year-old child. And it was because, like I said, I was struggling a lot with the fallout of the accident and the whole fiasco and the sort of existentialism of it. And so I was pretty depressed for a while, which is not ideal when you're that young because you don't know really what to do about that or what that is. And it's sort of like a very early slap in the face.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that slap in the face was probably more like cold water. It's just sort of it's like, oh shit, life isn't always great. Sometimes it really sucks, and the things that you enjoy stop being fun and all of that. So I think I was really trying to figure out what the fuck was going on, and what is happiness and how do you get it? Can I get some of that, please? Is there a discount at the moment? So I was really trying to figure out that, and so I ended up writing about it. But the problem is, because you do cement your words and you do cement your thoughts, time I finished writing the book, I was like, that's all bullshit. None of that makes any sense. So, because it was all matters of intuition for the most part, and I think especially being so young as well, my opinions and perspectives on things were changing drastically and very quickly. There's some good shit in there that I still believe, but yeah, that's the scary thing about writing as well, is that you do have to bring yourself into the light, and it's like you can build a brilliant bridge on as much theory as you like, but you got to stand on it, see if it's stable, and that's sort of what you're doing with your own ideas when you write, is you're standing on the bridge you built, seeing if it's stable. And most people don't want to do that because they don't want to know if it falls, because you bruise your ego doing that. But yeah.
Nice. And I mean, we mentioned it a few times now, talking about your book, and we finally get to it after like 37 minutes into the recording. For those of you who don't know, obviously the link will be in the show notes. It's called Do Bitcoin, The Future of Money and What You Need to Know. It's part of is that the Do Book publishing series thing, right? There are like different books with different titles in that series. When you initially had the idea for the book, were you approached, or did you approach the publishers?
Yeah, so they approached me first. I did a talk so the Do Book company, the Do Publishing company, is owned by the Do Lectures, who are a lecturing thing, kind of like TED, and they host this annual event in Wales, and I think I'm not sure if they do the American one anymore, but they used to do some around America and stuff as well. But yeah, anyway, they hold this annual event in Wales, and they brought me on to speak about my journey and Bitcoin and stuff like that back in 2018. And then afterwards, they offer the opportunity to write a book to some of the people that give talks, and so they had offered it to me, but I'd said no originally because I wasn't entirely confident in my understanding of sort of down to the root of things, the tech and all of that. I wasn't fully confident, so I was like, I'm going to hold out. And luckily I did, because it was during that period of time that I was still sort of bordering on shitcoiner and still going through that process of, figuring things out and unraveling things. So luckily I did delay it. But then, yeah, a couple of years ago, actually 1 year ago. Yeah, so in about August, I think it was, or July of 2021, I just reached out to them and I was like, yeah, that book you offered me like 3 years ago? Yeah, any chance that's still going? and they were like, they had a call with me and stuff and said, yeah, have at it. So, and spent 3 months writing it, and it came out in October 6th it was, of 2022, which is last year now, which sounds weird to say. But yeah, so that was basically the book story, how that came about. Luckily, I didn't end up writing a book on shitcoins, because that would have haunted me forever. Narrowly escaped that one.
Yeah, I think you did a nice job in the book, because first of all, it's perfect size in my opinion. It's 105-ish pages. Very compact. You can throw it into a backpack, into a briefcase. if you're wearing cargo shorts or pants, you can even fit it in there somehow. And I like the way you build the book. So you go into the more big picture stuff, like what is money? How do we need it? Then you sort of dive into the technical things. And at the end, you actually land at the philosophical questions, like what is the future? What can Bitcoin literally fix? And I do know two people who have, just local business shops, coffee shop, one has a restaurant. I actually gave them your book. And they were like, oh, okay, so I can actually just use it as like either a marketing channel. That's how they looked at Bitcoin, except the McGinn store. Or literally one guy, he's from South America, so he's used to like high inflation and stuff. He started going down the Bitcoin hole. And now every morning when I go out and get my croissant and my coffee, he's waving over and he's asking me stuff about Bitcoin, and I can never leave. That might be a mistake if I want to get up in the morning and have my breakfast in peace. But was that the vision for you, having that sort of structure within the book? And first of all, for whom is the book? Is it for everyone? Is it for business owners? Or did you just essentially write it for yourself to have the story out there?
Yeah, so it was, so I guess we'll take it right back to the beginning of the conversation about the burning building and the finding the way to get out. So this, I think, was an attempt of explaining a little bit about, I guess let's use the Titanic analogy. It was a bit about explaining what the lifeboat is, what lifeboats are, how they work. You don't need to be scared of them, kind of thing. And a lot of people need to hear that. And, I spent a few years helping set people up in Bitcoin and stuff, and doing sort of consultancy in that space. And there was a lot of confusion, and it's fair enough. It's a confusing topic, and it makes you think about things in ways that you're not used to. And I think that's probably fundamentally because it's sort of this transject that sort of doesn't fit nicely into the subjective or the objective. And so people, when you can't agree whether or not something's an object or if it's subjective, it becomes quite awkward for people who are used to thinking in that mode. And there's a lot of problems with that being the case. Mainly that, as I was saying again at the beginning, the fucking thing is sinking, right? And we need a way off. And if you don't get people to understand this thing, you risk allowing it to essentially fall, because Bitcoin is an idea, and ideas are by nature existing in the realm of the understood and the not understood. And so if you want to get people behind Bitcoin and subscribing to it and into it, then you have to teach them about it. They have to understand it. Now, I know that there's also the more realistic option for adoption, which is just you make it work and you make it profitable, which is hopefully there's a lot of work being done on that, with like Fedi and stuff like that, especially in the global south, that is really interesting. And I think it's probably the best way to go after them. But I think because it's so conceptual as a project, then we need to have a way to explain it to people. And so the way that I have found myself struggling to learn and then succeeding to learn over the course of my sort of self-education online is that I noticed a common problem. A lot of people, when they're explaining things, there's just words that don't register to people, right? And words, I don't know if anybody here has done any programming or anything, but you can assign a variable, right? And the variable can have meaning, and the meaning that you put in the variable essentially is what the computer would use to actually enact a function or run an iteration or something like that. And words are essentially analogous to variables, and they're not the content itself, they're not the information or the meaning itself, they hold the meaning. And so if you keep directing people to words that hold no meaning to them, such as mining, decentralization, hash rate, all of this stuff, they're going to keep drawing blanks, and then you're going to ask them to return with a 4K resolution picture of what you were just talking about, and they're going to be like, I got nothing. So you need to first fill those. I'd say I call it the filing cabinet method, because it's like, imagine you have a filing cabinet in your head, a psychological one, and you have to direct people to the drawers with your words, and the drawers then, when they pull them, they get the meaning out of it. And so if you keep directing people to empty drawers and asking them to return with some masterpiece, it's not going to happen. So first you have to fill the jaws, and the best way to do that is to use ones that are already full. So that's why I really like the metaphors, because they allow you to essentially communicate ideas to people without them fully knowing exactly that you're communicating a Bitcoin idea. You can just communicate the idea, and without them knowing that it's a Bitcoin idea, they don't shut down, because a lot of people do that. As soon as you say Bitcoin and mine, they go, oh, this is in the realm of the things that I don't understand, and therefore I'm going to shut off, and I'm not going to talk about it. I'm done. It's scary to them because, confusion is a horrible experience as a human being. It's one of the worst states to be in, is a state of confusion. And so people don't want to go down that road, especially if they're tired, especially if they have 9 to 5s, especially if they have a day job, and shit to do. So the idea with the book was to do a first attempt, and it is a first attempt because this is going to take ages to get right, but it is my first attempt at explaining Bitcoin with all of that in mind, such that I'm not directing people to empty cabinets in their head, and hopefully they will come out of it the other end from knowing nothing to having at least some sense or some semblance of an idea of either what the thing is or why it is. And if they can get either of those from the book, I'm going to be incredibly happy. And so, yeah, that's I guess the what I'm trying to do with it, and why I wrote it. And the other part to it, which worked nicely as to why I wrote it, was just like I was saying about putting your ideas into words, right? It makes you look at them. So I probably learned half of what I know about Bitcoin just from writing what was in my head, because beforehand it was sort of jumbled. Now it's clear. And so I recommend to anybody who's learning about Bitcoin or even listening to this podcast, I can assume that you listen to a few Bitcoin podcasts, just at the end of it, try and take what you remembered while it's still fresh and just write some stuff about it, and then maybe publish it. It might help someone.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to a CEO of a big Bitcoin project yesterday. I'm not sure if I can disclose the name, so I'm just not going to do it. And we talked about that part where Bitcoin is so open to many things. I see it a lot in my day job. So I talk to a lot of like fintech institutions, and whenever I bring up Bitcoin, the number one response is oh, that's where these stupid laser eyes idiots online always attack you if you say something wrong, which is like, fair point. I think this is something we could improve. But then the second point is like, once they get it, especially the institutions, they're like, holy shit, these are either payment rails or, I have, spoken to one big institutions where they literally went, if we can exchange the current banking system or the tech stack as we use it now, because this is like super old tech with like the old financial legacy system. Then they brought in fintech, they're reiterating and shit. If we can exchange that for just one standard, which could be the Bitcoin protocol as it is, and build on top of that, oh my fucking God, that's usually the response I get. How amazing is this going to be? And that's not even factoring in that they look at Bitcoin as an asset or an investment. It's literally just technology we can use, and look at stuff like Nostr and all of these things. You can build more than financial stuff on it. And yeah, I think that was the one message or the one feeling I had after reading your book. Sorry. Because I mean, I've been in it long enough to read different books, but yours was really refreshing. And I especially like the last chapter, sort of the future vision of Bitcoin, which I'm sure we get into a bit later on in the episode as well.
Cool.
For you personally, looking back now at your Bitcoin journey, Angelo, is there anything besides not starting with altcoins you would do differently?
Learn quicker.
Cool.
Yeah. I learned. It sounds so demoralized or demasculating when you say I learned at my own pace. I sound like a idiot, but I did. I learned at my own pace, and my own pace could have been quicker. There was a long period where I didn't fully get it, and so I was learning bits and bobs here, and wasn't fully going out and confronting that feeling of confusion, because it was horrible. And we like to feel like we know things and we've got a grasp on things. And, when you try tackle Bitcoin, it's like you don't understand it and it's going to feel awkward and horrible. And so I probably avoided delving into it as deeply as I could, and I probably could have done that earlier. And that would have just given me more time to focus on, showing the escape route. And so, yeah, if anybody's slightly looking into Bitcoin at the moment and it's sort of, they feel like they could spend more time looking into it, but they're not, I'd say just do it, because that time does play a factor. It is a variable in this equation, and so if you have some interest in it, just delve into it as much as you can. It's going to feel horrible because you're not going to get it, and there's going to be bits that you pull your hair out over, but it'll grow back, and it will be worth it in the end. Trust me.
I'm pointing into the lack of hair I've got on top of my head, but yeah.
But you managed
learning.
You managed with the beard, Ian. You sort of compromised there.
I did, yeah. I had to have some hair on my head somewhere.
So what you also put into that category then, Angelo, not only consuming content, you mentioned producing it. Mm-hmm. As soon as you learned something, try putting your thoughts out there. How important would you rank meeting Bitcoin enthusiasts in real life? Because that's funny enough how Ian and I met and decided to then do the podcast and one of the Bitcoin meetups.
Oh, very high. Yeah. It's, it's dialectic, right? It's the fundamental truth thing. If there was a fundamental truth thing, it would be conversation. It's how we come to terms with other people's opinions and reach middle ground. And the middle ground is almost always a higher resolution picture of reality than any of the two participants' original understandings of the question at hand. So if you are going to go out or if you're not going to, then do it. And if you are going to go out and talk to Bitcoiners and stuff, don't just recite the scripture. This is one thing that is really annoying, I think, in Bitcoin meetups at this point, is a lot of people go there and, I'm just as bad for it because there's so many people, and I think a lot of Bitcoiners are naturally quite introverted and they'd rather, learn about things on their own. But if you are out there, trust me, nobody's going to get pissed off at you unless they're a dickhead. They're not going to get pissed off at you if you ask a question or question them on one of their things, or think, actually, no, I see what you're saying, but I learned this thing the other day and it doesn't quite fit what you're saying, but I'm not going to mention it because you probably know more than me and you're probably just super genius because you understand Bitcoin better than I do. Like, get rid of all that. Just show up, ask all the questions, be as annoying as you possibly can, and just really make people question their own understandings of things, and just sort of have that head-on collision of ideas, and then for the sort of the rubble of that will rise like a phoenix, a better understanding of Bitcoin. Yeah, it'll be like it's the best way to go about it. And if you're going to show up and sort of recite the scripture and just stick to the script and talk about what you heard the guy online say, and never ask questions when you don't fully understand something, then it'll be fine, but it'll just slow down your learning, and you don't want to waste your own time. So yeah, go out, and it'll probably help the person you're talking to as well, because it's very easy to echo chamber yourself in Bitcoin and have people not fully explore beyond the parameters of the things that are sort of got the stamp of approval from Bitcoin Twitter as okay to say and stuff like that. So and I guess on that point as well, quickly, is you mentioned the laser eye people on Twitter that'll be mean to you if you didn't say if you said something wrong. Like, I've already said the word shitcoin a bunch, so I've definitely pissed off a lot of people already, but I'm gonna piss off even more now by saying all the maxis need to go suck a dick, right? Because if you're just shoving people into a corner and saying, oh, we're not even going to talk to you if you're a shitcoiner, or we're not even going to put your, I heard a story of Bitcoin Wales the other day not getting listed on this Bitcoin meetup site because they had a single image in their website that had other altcoins in the back of it, so this stock photo. Even though it's a Bitcoin meetup, they had altcoins in a stock photo, and it's like, so it didn't get registered on the meetup site. And it's like, if that's you, right, then here's what you're doing. Okay, so you have this idea that Bitcoin is the best thing, right? And all the shit coins are shit, right? Cool, fine. But then what you're saying is they're shit because they're scams, right? And I'm good because I don't sell scams, right? I'm not going to get sponsored by BlockFi, right? I'm not one of those. And so you take that position and you're essentially digging a hole as a moral high ground, essentially, into a thing, which is exactly what the people do that you hate, the woke people, by the way. And so
yeah, totally.
when you do that, you're essentially doing what the woke people do on the other side of the spectrum, and you're refusing conversation with people that are genuinely, in your own words, getting scammed and getting done over. And the reasoning behind it is, oh, they're so stupid, they don't get it, have fun staying poor. it's like,
Yeah.
do you really care about this shit, or are you just morally posturing? Just and then
Yeah, it's almost like they pedestal themselves and shit on people from above unnecessarily. You know, we're all on the journey here. We're all trying to understand our own perspective in the world, and we've all discovered Bitcoin, but it doesn't mean the same thing to everyone else. You know, like you said, Angelo, we need to have the open conversations like we're having now in the meetups. The best meetups I've been to, the ones where I'm stood with a group of 2 or 3 people, and we're having a debate. Not an argument, but we're having a healthy debate. We're giving each other our perspective of the world and of how Bitcoin plays a part in it. And there's been so much learning taking place from myself and the people involved in that, because you say and see things that you might have had blind spots to because of where you grew up or the type of person you might be. You know, by remaining open-minded and being part of the conversation, which is an ongoing conversation, and you know, like you said, when you wrote your piece when you were younger after your accident about happiness, and that you changed your mind at the end of it, you know, it's by putting it out there and reflecting on those ideas and then bringing it back to what you now know. That's the only way I think we can move forward in a healthy way, and that's the best route into Bitcoin, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm so glad you brought it up, Angelo, because that would have been my next question, but it sort of sorted itself out. I actually wrote shameless self-plug here. I know, but fuck you all. I'm paying for the hosting and I can plug my own show. I wrote a piece about this because one of my goals for 2023 and beyond is we have to be more critical of ourselves. And I'm talking about the community, because obviously we 3 all in here share and love Bitcoin in whatever form and fashion. But at the end of the day, too much, especially on Bitcoin Twitter, is all rainbow and sunshine. I can't tell you how often I read Bitcoin fixes this, and then you sort of sit there and think like, okay, in theory, but we all know practically it looks a bit different. And I really appreciated that you brought up that point, because I think for all the listeners out there as well, just because someone is maybe lost in its course, favorizing, you mentioned the whales thing with the image, or even if someone comes up to you and says like, hey, I still have some, I don't know, Solana or whatever, do you think I should trade it to Bitcoin? Don't immediately say yes. Start listening what they have to say. Start listening why they did these things, because often it's really to a lack of understanding of how these things work. And maybe give them a link to the copy of Angelo's book to bring it back to your story.
It's definitely.
Yeah, please. But I agree. Yeah, it's unfortunately as well. Like, you know, if somebody says, you know, I've got some Solana, shall I trade it for Bitcoin? And you go, yeah, and you walk away. It's like, all right, maybe you got other things to do. But at the end of the day, if somebody says, I got some Solana, shall I trade it for Bitcoin? And you go, really? You got Solana? You fucking idiot! You're
right.
such a retard. Then they've shut off. You're not going to teach them anything. You don't want to help them, right? You just want to stop that, right? You know. So yeah, it's 100%. There's too much of that, and you know, if shitcoins are a problem because they're scams, then what you should really be doing is, rather than just, you know, sort of waving your dick around and saying, you know, I figured out something that you haven't, and stuff, like actually help these people to understand why they're in scams, and it'll take a while for them to get it, and they will never get it so long as, you know, you keep being a dick, basically. Because, and not that I'm against being a dick, sometimes you've got to be a dick, right? But just in this case, don't do it if you're going to then go and say that the reason that you like Bitcoin is because scams are run by, you know, assholes that are just trying to harvest the money, and then you're not trying to do anything about the victims of the thing that you're saying is the devil, essentially. So so yeah, it's definitely an awkward place to be in as a community at the moment, because I mean, picture this, right? Say you are into altcoins and stuff, and you've got the idea in your head that Bitcoin is essentially, you know, MySpace, and then Ethereum is like Instagram or whatever. That's the general approach. It's like, oh, it's the first one there, so you know, it's the revolutionary thing, but it's also the oldest, and will end up being, you know, I've heard that it's slow, and I've heard that it's clunky, and you know, I've also heard about these people, Bitcoin maximalists or something, and they think that it's the only good one, which I think, you know, just my initial emotional response to that is, oh, if you think it's the only good one, you're probably a bit of a dinosaur, aren't you? You're one of those sort of stuck in your own ways type thinking person. You're not open-minded, probably. You're probably quite closed-minded, and and you just don't want to give the time of day to anything else other than like your honeypot, or maybe you feel like you missed the boat. And the type of image of the idea of a maxi that altcoiners will end up having in their head is somebody that's like essentially fits that model, a very rigid person that's maybe a little bit of a dickhead and a bit defensive. And if they have that idea and then they go out and they talk to one and they just get shut down instantly, called a shitcoiner and laughed at, then you're only validating the belief that they had about you in the first place. And because we're humans, that's only going to go on to validate the belief that they had about Bitcoin and about the tech and about altcoins, because we can't automatically separate the opinions of people from the contents of the opinion. It's quite a hard thing for humans to do. And so when you are essentially advocating for Bitcoin by being a dickhead, you're taking a bunch of these people who are literally getting crushed by SBFs of the world, and you're throwing them to the side, laughing at them, and just painting yourself as the exact type of person that you know that they wouldn't listen to if you had a genuinely good thing to say, on the contrary to what they believe. And you're not going to continue the conversation. You're not going to help them. They're going to keep getting crushed, and they'll just continue to be this split down the middle divide in the conversation, which is never a good thing. We need conversation.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I feel quite lucky that way because, like I mentioned beforehand, I'm like with one leg. I wish I were in Bitcoin landscape only with both legs, but unfortunately, you got to put food on the table and pay for shit. So I'm also in like I wouldn't say TradFi world, but I'm more in like the fintech world where a lot of fintech people know that the banking system is rotten to its core. It's broken, but they're trying to come up with more modern solutions, with more transparent solutions. At the end of the day, I really have to say it how it is. And if I talk to these people, again, if they don't get it, why should I neglect that fact and saying like, okay, maybe you like stable coins more because you're used to seeing 1 for 1, but what about if we say 1 for 5,000, for example, if it's like whatever it is currently with the price in Bitcoin and sats, or maybe in 10 years time, 1 for 20, 1 for 15, whatever it might be. Imagine having a different asset that's not controlled by a central state. Isn't that how we as humans should operate? And just by bringing up these simple arguments and not, as you say, go fuck yourself and have fun, stay poor. I think this will help Bitcoin adoption massively more than, unfortunately, being stuck in the echo chamber on Twitter and sort of wanking each other off with nice compliments and replies. And I know we're going to get heat for these comments, but at the end of the day, guys, if you're into Bitcoin, if you truly believe in it, everyone's welcome. And the protocol doesn't care, doesn't give a shit what you say or what you do, as long as you help get people on board. But yeah, Angelo, looking into the future, we haven't spoken about what you do throughout the whole day, and I think it's getting into a nice length of the episode that we don't need to cover it directly. But what is the next 5 to 10 years hold for you personally, and where do you see yourself in the Bitcoin landscape doing what you do now?
So I guess my goal is to, well, I think my goal was sort of stated earlier about with the lifeboats and that, and I think education is at the core of that, and the education is just the transmission of information between humans, and there are many mediums through which that can happen. There's written, which I did the book, and then there's audio, which is what you guys are doing, and then there's video, which I think is being neglected by Bitcoin at the moment. And I don't think there's that many great video people at the moment. And so essentially I've been hired by, I started about a year and a half ago, Permissionless, which was going to be a show about essentially Bitcoin and education and Bitcoin, and I was going to delve into essentially making that my mission. And then, Danny, I met him at a conference after asking a question to the panel from the audience, and he came up and talked to me afterwards. Ended up telling him about the videos and my intentions with them, and he ended up hiring me over to Fast Bitcoin. So now I'm working here, and I've got a nicer camera than I had before, thanks to Danny for that. And I've got a better setup, and we're just building a studio literally next door at the moment. And we're going to start making ideally the best Bitcoin content there is, and just trying to really explain it in as many different ways as possible. And it'll be an iterative process. It's not going to be perfect initially, but I think in the next, you said 5 to 10 years, I really want to basically have like the place that complete new starters go to if they want to understand more about Bitcoin and get some decent information about it. And video is the best way to do that, because I mean, there's been countless studies now that it's people respond best to video out of all of the mediums. Is a little bit more tricky to produce and there's more intricacies, but luckily it crosses over nicely with me because I've had an interest in filmmaking for the past few years, so I've learned a bit about it already. And so hopefully in 10 years I'll be orange pilling people passively. I'll have a passive orange pill going on at the YouTube channel. So that's the goal.
And that's Fast Bitcoin's YouTube channel, right?
Yes. Yeah.
We'll definitely link it in the show notes then.
Yeah,
cool.
most definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna start posting. I haven't started it yet, by the way. So if you go on there and you're like, it's basically there's some videos of Amsterdam and the interview. Yes, so you can go see that. And then so soon it'll start ramping up and turning up the heat on that. It's just been a process of getting all the pieces in order, but yeah, it's full steam ahead as soon as that happens. And yeah.
Angelo was just brushing off. I have a couple of videos from interviews up, but he literally interviewed like Adam Beck, so not a biggie. He has a few good videos up already.
Oh my god, mate, I was shitting myself.
I can imagine.
Awkward situation. Right, so I was like basically running around Amsterdam at Bitcoin Amsterdam, trying to get the best content that I could with this camera on top of this monopod, and I was basically just running up to people and saying, "Do you want to answer a few questions?" You being one of them, and I was inside, and Danny messaged. Danny knows Adam, and I always thought that was very cool. And yeah, he just messaged me like, "Hey, by the way, have you got your camera on you?" I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "Right, you got Adam. It could be at any point in the next 10 minutes. Be ready."
Holy shit!
I was like, "What the fuck? What do you mean, be ready?" So I started like, obviously I'd researched a lot about him over the years and for the book and stuff, but in that moment I forgot everything. And so I was on Google then just trying to like refresh my brain, trying to come up with the best questions. Like you're 5 minutes away from talking to Adam back on camera, and you got to come up with the questions for it. So yeah, I was sort of having a fanboy moment, but it was really fun. He's got a different energy about him that just, there's something about that guy.
I like the part in the interview where you go like, "Do you have hobbies outside of Bitcoin?" And he goes like, I like to solve puzzles and Rubik's cubes and cryptography, whatever there is out there." And I sort of sat there like, "Holy shit, I can't even solve a Rubik's cube," And he does that as like a hobby. But we'll link that below.
By the way, the Rubik's cube thing, it's a false. It's fake complicatedness. It seems complicated. There's a trick. It's not like you're supposed to just look at it and figure it out. There's algorithms that you can get. It's like a 1 A4 piece of paper. I used to do it when I was younger, and it's a great way to make yourself seem smart. But yeah, the main thing is trying to do it as quick as possible. If you have like a Rubik's cube with 4 rather than 3 columns and rows, then it gets a lot more complicated. But the one with 3, the standard one you see at the toy shops, you can learn how to do that in like a couple hours. So
yeah, I guess it's doing the daisy one, and then if you got like the daisy set up, you can do a couple of twists and turns, and then it's basically solved. That's at least how I learned it. But just hearing his interview, we'll also link it in the show notes. That was fun to see.
I used to take the stickers off and try and read.
That takes longer than just learning.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, it never works as well. But yeah, the hobbies question was fun. We did a video basically compiling all of the answers to that question that everybody gave, and it was hilarious to see people, they're sort of in their bag reciting the scripture the whole time, and then you say, what are your hobbies outside of Bitcoin? And it's just what did you say? Can you repeat yourself? Yeah, it was quite funny.
Nice.
Angelo, is there anything you want to say that we haven't asked you? Is there anything that you want to sort of mention before we wrap it up this evening?
Follow me on Twitter.
Yeah, what's your Twitter, Angelo?
It's at Angelo_Somers, spelled Somers. I think that's correct. Please put it in the show notes because I don't even know.
We'll put it in the show notes.
We'll definitely put it in.
Not know your own handle. Yeah.
I thought. Oh no, it's Son of Satoshi it's like the name on Twitter, right?
That's the name, yeah.
Yeah. I'll definitely put in the username and all the links below.
Cool. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Well, it was very nice having you on, Angelo. I thought this was a fun episode. We covered a lot of tracks and bases. And for everyone listening, go ahead. Again, buy Angelo's book. Make sure to follow the Fast Bitcoin channel. And I guess if you're at one of the conferences, go and say hi, because they're fun to talk to. Both of the brothers. You'll see your brother next week, or hear your brother next week. And don't be shy to ask questions. I think that's the number one thing I took away from today's episode. So thank you for being on.
I'm just
thanks. And if you're not sure which one is me and which one is my brother's the one with the tiny calves, and then I'm the one with the muscly calves.
Giga Chad.
Giga Chad, yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for being on, and
it's been
we'll
an
hear you
absolute pleasure.
soon again.